The dawn of time. Ape Man stood. Ape Man had a stick, and Ape Man was hit with a rock. Ape Man now had stick and rock. The ancient game of hurling was about to be born. This happened across the world, from France, Spain, the Middle East, to Australia, and all the way back to Ferns. But Ape Man everywhere had difficulty with the new game. Ball control was difficult. It was obvious this was going to be a tough game to master. It was the early Celts who developed the game, and they left behind the first coaching manuals and the first coaching videos. Next, Christianity came to Ireland, and the game prospered in its monasteries and churches. Hurling was very popular with the saints, but not so much with the scholars, as it interrupted their important work. St Aidan brought the gospel of the game to Ferns. At first, the local pagans were unconvinced. But St Aidan continued to preach, and at last he converted them to the ways of Christianity and of hurling. However, they didn't lose all of their old pagan ways. Note the slight kick here. That certainly wasn't very Christian. Hurling began to prosper in Ferns, and centuries later, Diarmuid MacMurrough became the team manager. But in 1169, he found himself short some players for the Gorey district final. This left him with a problem, but he soon thought of a solution. He journeyed across the sea in the quest for reinforcements. And he met his general, Strongbow Andy Fitzholden, who proved a master at bringing in players from other places. They were all full of enthusiasm to play for Ferns. And with these outsiders, Ferns won the district final. But Fitzholden was called back to Normandy for a county board objection, and Ferns lost the county final. "500 years later, Cromwell arrived. These were dark days for hurling, as Cromwell's soldiers confiscated the hurls from the local population and burned them. This oppression of Gaelic games continued in the years that followed, as the English forces brought messages from the Queen to say that all Irish games were banned, and only English games could be played instead. The English rubbed their new games in the face of the local population, who didn't know what to do. Some decided to go and try play the English games despite the protestations of their friends. But when they approached the English, they were laughed at and ridiculed and even kicked. Along came Father Murphy, who urged the Irish to fight back against their oppressors and reclaim their land and their native games. The rising at first went well, and the Irish enjoyed some great success. But the English fought back with their football bombs, and the rising failed. 50 years later, hurling balls were in short supply, so the Irish used potatoes instead. But potatoes proved dangerous, and so the helmet was developed. This also led to the development of what we now know as potato wedges. In the 1840s, potatoes became scarce during the famine, and people sometimes resorted to eating them rather than hurling with them. This meant the game of hurling again suffered, but eating was more important. In 1887, the games took another giant step forward in Ferns, as a meeting took place and a new club was formed. In the years that followed, Ferns St Aidans fielded many teams of gallant men from the ancient capital, and they enjoyed a number of early successes. Even if sometimes they did bend the rules slightly, particularly with regard to overage players. As Andy Holden, descendant of Strongbow Andy Fitzholden, sometimes resorted to using some older people. Then in 1939, Ferns had their biggest day yet when they reached the county senior hurling final. But they were beaten. In 1940, full of enthusiasm, they returned to the final. Again, they were beaten. In 1941, they hoped it would be third time lucky, and again, fired up, they went out to play the final. But again, they were beaten. Things got better in the 50s, and in 58, there were scenes of great celebration, as Ferns won minor hurling, minor football, intermediate hurling, and junior hurling, giving them 4 cups. In 1961, there was more celebrations, as this time, they won the Echo Shield. Then in 1969, they returned to the county final, this time in Belfield against the Shamrocks. But again, they didn't go well, and they lost. In the 1970s, Ferns made a drop down to intermediate for the first time. But they've been up and down several times since. Several times. Up and down. But now they're up again, and staying up, and looking forward to the future.